from Abri, the Extension Services and Breed Plan team. Paul is the technical officer, providing extension and technical support, basically looking at maximizing the use of the genetic technologies. Paul has extensive beef cattle research experience, scanning for carcass and fertility traits. So Paul is no stranger. He was with us last year at Stockman School and gave a number of workshops after that. Very warm welcome. Delighted Paul is back with us and given up some time to prepare and give his presentation. So without further ado, very warm welcome to Paul, and thank you very much. Paul, over to you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Mario. Is that sharing my screen yet?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning in South Africa and nighttime in Australia. So as Mario said, I'm going to talk about improving herd fertility and the key to increasing profitability. So as Mario gave an introduction to me, so I'll skip through that slide. So the overview of my presentation will be, I'm going to talk about why is fertility important, making selection decisions around that fertility, how to measure and interpret fertility EBVs, and the importance of fertility in those self-replacing breed object indexes as well. So why is fertility important in your herd? So first of all, we got to look at what are the drivers in production and profit. So the most one here is the number of calves that we can get on the ground, the weight of those calves, and the value we can send them off to when we sell those animals, less our cost of production. So what we're looking at, and mainly in this presentation here, we're looking at the number of calves that we can get on the ground during that calving season and how we can improve, what we can do to improve getting more animals or more calves being born. So we look at some of our South African indexes, and we can look at what are the main driving profit drivers that we're looking at for those indexes. And if we look down here, we can see that most of these, all of these indexes, calf weaning rate is our key profit driver that we're looking at for all of these indexes. So what we want to be doing is making selection that's going to give us more calves weaned at and weaning rate, higher weaning rate on those calves. So moving forward, so what do we want to be doing is, what do we want from those cows that we're looking for? We want a good cow should get in calf in the first or second cycle. You wanted to carry that calf the full term of that gestation length. You wanted to give birth to a nice live calf without assistance. You wanted to wean that calf. And the most important thing, you want to get that cow back in calf and repeat that cycle again year after year. And you should be able to do this without consuming too much excessive amount of feed. So we want to keep that maintenance level down on those cows as well. So if we're going to giving birth, we want that cow to no calving difficulties. Calving difficulties have a negative impact on the profitability through that. So we want to increase the calf heifer and have low or cow mortality. So we don't want to be losing cows. It slows the rebreed of the performance of those females. And the additional labour and veterinary costs if we have to get a vet out because that cow's having trouble calving as well. So we want to be getting those calves on the ground without any problem for that cow having that calf as well. The advantage of that cow getting pregnant on that first or second cycle is it's shorter joining period. It's a shorter calving down period. And then later in life, because that calf's being born earlier in the calving season, you're more likely that calf will be have advantage over those calves born, those later born calves. I mean, they'll be heavier weaners. Looking later in life, those heifers that are born early are more likely to get in calf at a younger age than those ones born late in that calving season, mainly due to the fact that when we do mate those ones, those later calving ones are a lot younger when we put those heifers with the bulls. And failure to get pregnant is often due to the heifer not being sexually mature. So those later maturing types, born late in the season, not old enough, but also those late maturing ones, those ones that have poor fertility within their pedigree, those are the ones that are going to be late calves and will probably drop out in that next calf as well. What do bulls we should want from our bulls? We want that bull to reach puberty younger in life, because this is highly correlated with puberty of the sisters and also the daughters of that bull as well. We want them to be structurally sound so they can walk around that paddock and service all those cows. Another important thing, we want them to pass a bull breeding soundness evaluation. So we're looking, have a good scrotal circumference, pass a physical examination of their scrotum, have good quality semen, which has also been that's high mortality, high motility and mass activity. And also, if we can, we want to get a morphology to make sure that there's no, we've got good quality semen as well, which has a huge effect on those conception rates out from those bulls when they're mating. Those bulls with very high morphologies will have a lot more calves born earlier in the season as well. And they want to be able to serve the cows as well. So we want to look at the serving capacity of those bulls. So we want a bull that can work, have good quality semen, and give the best opportunity for those females to be getting in calf with that sire, and him producing calves as well. So why we want to be measuring the scrotal size? Scrotal size circumference is an important indicator of the genetic merit for several male fertility traits. So an increase in scrotal size, and we want to be doing them earlier in age. So we want to be measuring those bulls earlier in age. Those bulls that have earlier puberty will have sisters that have earlier puberty, and their daughters as well will have earlier puberty as well. Also, it'll increase the semen production and also improve semen quality of those bulls that are reaching sexual maturity earlier in life. So, as I said, it's also a favorable correlation with female fertility. So if you're selecting bulls with positive scrotal EBVs, it's a likely to father daughters which will have earlier heifers to reach age of puberty. They'll earlier to return to estrus. And then also those daughters, it'll help with having shorter days to calving EBV, which I'll talk about soon. So can you make selection decisions in improving fertility? This is just some of the results that came out of some research that's been done in Australia. So with this heifer age of puberty, we were in that opportunity where we actually ovarian scanned these heifers monthly from once they'd reached 200 kilograms right through until some of the animals were over 400 kilograms and reached puberty. And we can see here that in Brahmins, that was a 55% heritable trait. So what it's saying is that bulls from those top sires was very heritable, and they were far more likely to get daughters that were going to be cycling earlier as age of puberty. And also in the tropical composites, we can see that was quite high as well. And that's similar to not as high as hip height, but we're getting similar sort of as we would with growth and carcass traits and the heritabilities for those. And so it's under considerable genetic control. So if we just look some results that came out of that research, this is just looking at some Brahman bulls. We're looking at adjusted sign meads for age when they had their first corpus luteum or CL. So if we make this bull the first bull here, he was the benchmark at day 0. So if we go across, look at these bulls, we can see that for those daughters of those bulls on this list, there was a 264-day difference on the age of puberty from when that first bull's daughters had reached puberty through to when this bottom bull's daughters were reaching puberty. So we're looking at months, quite a few months there, and the difference in the age when those daughters were going to reach puberty. And as we saw before, it's a heritable trait. So we want to decrease when our daughters, how long it takes our daughters to reach puberty. We want to be using bulls down this end of that scale. And that's across all breeds as well. So although the spread mightn't be as big, it doesn't matter what breed, we're going to have those bulls that are better for reaching puberty than those, and there's bulls that are going to be later at reaching puberty as well. But if we don't measure these traits, we won't have that information to know which bulls are better to be doing it. We also looked at lactation and estrus intervals. So we looked at how long it took those cows to get back in calf after they'd been with the bull on their first lactation. And once again, we can see for Brahmins, that was a highly heritable trait and a little bit less in composites, tropical composites. But once again, it's clear that genetic has a basis in that lactation and estrus. And there's certainly some big sire differences also in that first lactating calf and daughters. In saying that, as we can see, this is just looking over a 4-year period at one of the research stations, and we can see what the effect the environment is having. So in the 2014 drop animals, we can see they grew up in a very good season. So most of those daughters, most of those females had cycled by the time they'd come out of mating that year on their first calf, because it was a really good nutrition and they were able to do it. But if we go back to looking at this one here, the 2011 drop, we only had a few, not a high number of those daughters got back pregnant. Remembering this, we only mated these for 12 weeks. And we can see a lot of these animals didn't recycle to long after weaning had happened. And also you can see that if those females didn't get pregnant sort of that first 90 to 100 days, you really had to wait till you wean that calf before those females would come on cycling. So, and this all feeds through into the days to calving EBV. That's just showing you across different years how you can have a huge difference. But as we can see, it doesn't matter what year, we're getting animals that are able to get back and calf straight after going with the bull on that first calf, even though they've had a very tough season. And once again, this is just looking at those, at the sires again, and that's just looking at how long it took those daughters to get back and calf, being the first animal being a base of 0, the bull with the daughters that got back and calf first. And once again, we can see we're out to 121 days between the average when those daughters from the top bull and the bottom bull would get back pregnant. And if you're doing as we did, doing a 12-week mating, what it's saying that these bulls out this end would have very few daughters that have got back and calf by the time that bull has come out of mating. So once again, through selection, we can start to select bulls down this end of this graph, and that's going to have a lot more females that are going to get back and calf on their first calf. So now we've shown that we can actually measure and show that we can make some decisions on fertility to improve in our herd. But what we can then use, we can use breed plan EBVs to make that selection. So if we look at we have phenotype, so how the animal looks. So we're looking at the genetic side of things and environment. So genetics, we have half from the sire and the half to dam, and that's set at conception. And our environmental effects, that's your nutrition, the climate, your management, the health, the age of those animals. So what we want to be doing with breed plan is looking at this genetic component of this phenotypes of that animal. And it's difficult to see an animal's genes by just looking at them. So that's why we need to be recording and measuring this information. So what we're looking at breed plan EBVs, so we're looking at using that genotype, so describing the genetics and end of an animal that's independent to the environmental effect. So if all animals are treating of equal, we can then start looking at that part of the genotype part of the animal, and we can make some selection decisions by using EBVs, knowing that, well, the difference we are seeing is due to the genetics of that animals and not the environment. So I'm sure a lot of you would have seen what a breed plan EBVs looks like. So that's just how when you look up EBVs, you'll see them. Importantly, we can see here, it also has the traits that analyze, showing you which traits that for this bull has been registered, what has been recorded on that bull, number of herds he's been used in, how many progeny has, how many progeny have been scanned. And this one here is, for this sire, we know that 21 daughters have been analyzed and have information regarding the data recorded on them regarding some of the fertility traits as well. So the EBVs that affect the fertility of the female, so that's your calving ease, your gestation length, milk can have an effect, days to calving and scrotal size are the main ones that will have an effect on fertility that we can look at within our EBVs. So we look at calving ease to start with. So calving ease, it looks at the likelihood of a calving difficulty on a 2-year-old heifer. So we have two types of calving ease EBVs. We have the calving ease direct, which that's the ability of the sire calves to be born unassisted and is reported in the difference in a percentage of unassisted calving. So the higher the percentage of higher the EBV percentage means that bull is going to have a far less, will have less chance of having daughter. The cows will have trouble of calving through that bull. With calving ease daughters, that's the ability of that sire's daughters to calve without assistance. So the calving ease daughters EBV is also reported the difference in a percentage of unassisted calving, and this should be really considered if you're considering in a self-replacing herd. You don't want to be using these sires or a bull that has a low calving ease EBV, especially if you're calving as a 2-year-old. But that more likely those daughters will have trouble calving, being they're younger in age and probably not as well grown as if they were to be a 3-year-old calving. And as I said, a more positive EBV is the desirable EBV we want in this situation. So calving ease direct, as I said, yeah, it estimates a genetic difference in the ability of sires calves to be born unassisted from a 2-year-old heifer, and the calving ease direct also reports a difference, and the calving ease, sorry, that EBV shouldn't, that slide should have been taken out, sorry. The next one we look at is gestation length. So gestation length can be defined the period from the date of conception through to when the subsequent calf is to be born. And in this situation, we want a negative EBV, and gestation length is expressed in days. So the date of birth for the calves, we can only using for joining data that is from hand matings or AIs should be submitted to your breed society when you're submitting the calf registrations. And if you have any queries about how to submit your joining records, your AI date, your AI records, talk to your breed society and regarding how to submit that data. So when we're looking at mesh gestation length, and we can only use gestation length on those AI records and those hand mating records. Shorter gestation is associated with a lighter birth weight, improved calving ease. It also the chance of rebreeding and performance of those females. So those cows that we have been used by or have calves that are by bulls of short gestation length, that gives that cow more chance to get back and calf because that calf being born earlier than what other calves would be born. And also, in addition, calves that are born shorter gestation length, they may be heavier at weaning because they've had more time to grow because they were born earlier as well. The other one would be milk. That looks at the maternal contribution the cow has to 400-day weight of her calf. And the difference in milk EBV are influenced by the amount of milk the calf receives, the quality of that milk, and the mother ability of that dam. In saying that, the optimum milk EBV in your herd will depend on your environment, and that can have a huge effect on those females getting back in calf as well. If you're running on some very marginal country or poor quality pasture, having a cow with a very high milk EBV may have a detrimental effect, and that cow would lose too much condition and then lose the ability for that cow to get back and calf. So that is an EBV. You as an individual need to decide whether if you're on very good country and your cows will maintain condition or get back and calf, you can have a high milk EBV and those, which will help those calves be bigger at weaning and be able to turn them off earlier in life as well. The other one, probably the most important one, is the days to calving EBV, and it's a female fertility trait. And what we can see if we look at this timeline, or this timeline thing above me here, I'm looking at. So what we're looking at, the bull into mating to the calf born. So we're looking at that time between the mating and the calf is born. So the variation in this area here. So this is your gestation length. So we want to be getting those conception dates as close to the day of the bull-in mating as we can. So a day's calving, it promotes those cows that calve earlier in the season compared to those that are later calvers. And also there is a penalty for those cows that do not get in calf. They get a penalty on top of when that last calf is born. There's a penalty for those ones that do not get in calf. And once again, we want to have a more negative EBV for when we're looking at days to calving. And the variation in days to calving is mainly due to the difference in the time it takes for that female to conceive after the commencement of a joining period. People often say, if you have a cow that calves late in the season and always calves late in the season, even though she might calve every year, she's never going to have a really good negative days to calving EBV, mainly due to the fact that she's never in this situation where she's getting in calf not long after the bull has gone into mating. So she might have a good calving interval, but she not necessarily will have a very good days to calving because she's not getting that opportunity because she was late to get in calf that first calf. So, and that, as I talked about before, that could be due as a heifer because she was born later in the year and wasn't pubertal at this younger age. And because she was late calving that first calf, she's likely to stay a late calver or drop out of the system as well. So the dose calving EBV provides an estimate of the genetic difference between animals in the time from the start of joining period to when the female was introduced to the bull to the subsequent calving. And as I said, the days, it's expressed in days, and we want to have a more negative days to calving, which resulting in a shorter day calving period for those cows as well. So while the females with shorter days to calving are expected to conceive earlier in joining, these females also tend to be those that are reach puberty earlier as heifers, and those ones that return to estrus earlier after calving. So what that's saying is if you've got a females of good days to calving EBV, they're likely, and you're using a bull with good days to calving, you're going to have daughters that are going to reach puberty earlier, get in calf earlier, and more likely to get back in calf earlier as well. So if you're interested in recording the days to calving EBV, you need to record all events associated with that natural joining on that female. So if you do one mating period and you change them and put in a new bull, you want to start record a different mating period, a mating event for that second mating as well. So you want to be, important thing with your joining is also you do joining details for all females that are naturally mated within your herd. You need to detail all the females removed from your herd, especially those that are present at joining but no longer in the herd at calving. And you want to be recording all the calves are dead or alive born as a result of these joinings. The reason being, if you don't record that dead calf, breed plan doesn't know that that cow has had that calf, so make the assumption that she never actually had that calf. So, and the other one is very important that you record not just the females that got pregnant. You want to be recording all those that went into that joining. Otherwise, you'll be penalising those cows that did get in calf, especially those ones that are late calf, because it hasn't got those cows that didn't get in calf to compare them against. So you want to record each joining event to which the female is exposed. If the female is joined to several bulls in a mating season, record all joining of those females. So we need to record the bull in. And if you're doing a multi-sire joining, what you can do is contact your breed society and they can make an ident for that multi-sire group that you will then submit when you put in your joining records for that group, for that mating. So we need a bull joining, bull in date and a bull out date, and we need to know the sire that they went to and a management group for those females as well. The cows that have not calved at the bull in date, they are treated differently to those that have calved. So if you've got some cows that haven't calved and you put those bulls in, they are not directly compared against those females that are gone into mating and had already calved. The joining event code to be used when recording natural joining is N, which stands for either natural or paddock mating. You want to record your management group information to identify any cows within the group whose fertility may have been affected either prior or during that joining program due to non-genetic factors. So maybe the cow got sick, that cow was away for a while, had got out of the paddock and didn't have an opportunity to be a bull. You just want to record that information to let them know that those cows have been treated differently than the rest of those cows in the mating group. And yeah, record that date and the reason any females were removed from the herd, particularly those that were present at joining but not at calving. So if you have a cow that you did mate, but for some reason, or not due to infertility, or didn't get in calf, that she was taken out of that mating group, you want to record that so she doesn't get a penalty because it wasn't due to her not being in calf. So we need to do fate disposal code information on critical for days to calving, and for the analyst to determine whether the female that have a joining record but no calf should be penalised because she was culled for infertility and she didn't get in calf, and there'll be no penalties because she was culled for other reasons. She had structural or she performance, or she was an older cow that you decided that you wanted to move on. And your fate disposal codes used for days to calving, they are different than those disposal codes that you usually routinely use with your breed society when you're culling an animal out of your breed society database. And I've put the link here on the breed plan website, and where you can find recording performance, and there's a lot of information there on recording days to calving. And also, if you're not using Herdmaster, there are some Excel templates where we can also on the breed plan website where you can download some Excel templates to submit your joining records. And there's actually templates there for not only joining, but for all your traits that you would submit for breed plan. So the important points of days to calving, we want to collect joining information on all the females in the herd, not just those that have calved. Record details for all joining events in which the females was involved, even if you know that the joining was unsuccessful. Record accurate fates, disposal codes on all females which leave the herds. Joining details for females that have been joined in multiple sire groups should also be recorded. In this situation, as I said, a multiple sire ident should be the sire ident, the ID that you use. And herds of very wide calving spread or several calvings per year, it may be difficult to collect joining information. You should probably contact breed plan for further advice about that. If you're mating all year round, days to calving is probably not the trait that you would really work in your herd, because it's more made up for those that have controlled matings. And joining data and fate disposal code information on your female should be submitted directly to breed plan as well. And another thing is, as I said before, all calves that are born as a result of these joining need to be recorded with your breed society, and that includes those dead calves. We need them, otherwise it'll reduce the accuracy of your days to calving EBVs if you're not recording those dead calves with your breed society as well. The other one, we're looking at the male side of things, is the scrotal size. So the scrotal size EBV provides the estimate of the genetic differences between animals' scrotal circumference at a 400-day age. And scrotal size is expressed in centimeters. And ideally, we want to be, the higher the EBV for scrotal size is, the better the EBV. If you are recording scrotal size, it'll only be analysed if for breed plan if the bulls are measured between 300 to 700 days of age. But it's recommended you want to be recording those bulls. We suggest at that 400-day weight when you'd expect the greater variation in the scrotal circumference. The reason that we're getting the greater variation at that age, we're picking those bulls that have reached sexual maturity earlier. And if we leave it to later, like 600 or 700 days, when all the bulls have probably reached sexual maturity, we're not going to get that variation we see here at that 400-day weight. And the beauty of that is, as I said, we're getting that variation. We're going to have those bulls that have reached sexual maturity earlier, and we'll have those bulls that haven't done it. So we'll get more variation in that scrotal size. And breed plan recommends producers record scrotal circumference using what we recommend now is using one of these self-tensioning tapes, where you push this button down, and when there's enough tension on that scrotal, when you're measuring it, you'll see a red line will come, or a green line will, on this green bit here, it'll come through to a red line, or there'll be a line that shows you that you've reached the maximum tension you need to do when you're measuring that scrotal circumference or that scrotal size. So how to measure them? Pull the testes firmly down to the lower part of the scrotum, place the measuring tape around the widest point, and record that circumference in the centimeters to the 1 decimal place. So you can go, say, 34.1, 34.2. So when you are measuring the scrotals, it's important to measure the scrotal circumference in the bull is, as I said, approaching puberty, around that 400 days of age. Use a consistent measuring technique for all bulls. Only one person should be measuring one group of bulls, because you will get a slight variation potentially between two different people measuring them. Tension tape should be used just enough to cause a slight indentation of the skin on the scrotum. So that's if you're not using a self-tensioning tape and you're using one of those metal tapes. We don't recommend you use a tape that's used for sewing, because they can stretch. So you can buy either the metal measuring tape or these new self-tensioning tapes. What we don't want to be doing is place a thumb at the hand or holding the neck of the scrotum between the cords. So this will cause separation in testes, and that can lead to an inaccurate measurements to be taken. So we don't want to be doing the bottom one here. So we're going to have our hand firmly behind the scrotum and holding without pushing any pressure on the front. That will have that effect of separating those testes to making that larger than the actual measurement would be. And once again, when you're measuring bulls, even those that have abnormalities like one testicles, make sure those bulls are subgrouped into a different management group, and you're not putting them in the same group as the other bulls. And once again, if we look here, we can find more information in that recording performance data in there. There's videos and also a lot of information about recording scrotal circumference on the Breed Plan website as well. So moving on, now we've recorded our EBV. And I showed before about the importance on our selection indexes. So just a little bit about selection indexes. So the selection indexes use the breed object software. It combines Breed Plan EBVs for the animal, for the economic weighting based on cost of production and the return on those outputs to produce selection index values. So the selection index balances we're looking at the growth, the carcass, and the fertility genetic merit for each of the animals, and they can identify animals that show the most profitable for a particular production system. So you can have a lot of different production systems. You can have them set up as a self-replacing one, or you can have them as a terminal where fertility is not an important thing, because all we're going to be culling both the male and females of those animals. But if we are selection indexes, they enable the producer to make selection decisions that account for both the short-term profitability generated by the sire. So the short term is more of, if you just, as I said, terminal indexes, we're not keeping any of the progeny. So only looking at that size progeny as a terminal, selling them off and getting the value back on that sire, the progeny from that sire, where on the other end, we're looking at a long-term profitability when we're looking at a self-replacing. So we're also recording, or we want those daughters to stay in that herd for as long as they can. So we want to be having daughters out of bulls or daughters of good fertility that can stay in the herd, and then that way we're getting more daughters from those bulls, and then we'll actually get more profit from those sires because there's more daughters that stay in the herd having calves. So the selection index is expressed as the net profit per cow mated. So if we compare a bull that has an index of +60 with a bull that has an index of +30, we can estimate the difference in the net profit and the progeny from the bull would be. So we're getting half the difference in the index because only half is coming from the sire. So half of 60 minus 30. So you'd expect that there would be $15 per cow mated. So if that sire, that bull has a lot more daughters that stay in the herd, so we end up with a lot more of these cows. So it increases the value per cow mated because we've got a lot more cows that have stayed in the herd from those bulls with have good fertility in their daughters. So we go back and look at our key point for profit drivers, and we're looking at our calving weaning rate. And as we see in those indexes, that weaning rate is what's driving. We're getting more calves on the ground because of the size we're using, and we've had more of those daughters staying in the herd, increasing that weaning rate as well, because we've used those bulls with the higher daughters that'll have more calves being born. But if we look at the EBV weightings on these trade profit drivers that we looked at before, and we can see we talked earlier about we want those cows to have good calving ease, maternal and daughters. So that for the Sementalia one, we can see that along with the days to calving, so that there is the main EBVs that are driving this index. If we look at the Brangus one, once again, we're looking at some calving ease and the days to calving, along as we want the growth as well. But we can see if we're looking at the weightings on these EBVs on these indexes, we can see that the fertility EBVs are one of some of the major drivers that are driving the indexes. So we're getting higher dollar values on those bulls because they're having calves, or their daughters are getting in calf. They're easy to calve, and so we're getting more calves on the ground, and the cows are staying in the herd longer as well. So what are the key take-home messages from the female production performance? We need to focus recording heifer matings and the first rebreed. Those two joinings, you're joining as a heifer and your first rebreed, they have the biggest influence on the EBVs for the days to calving EBV. We need to be putting those mating details in the calving and weaning outcomes, and they drive that days to calving EBV. We want to be applying maximum selection pressure on that first and second mating. If we can get those cows through those first two calves, quite often they'll stay in the herd. But it's getting them to get in calf as heifers, and then to get them back in calf is the most difficult ones we have. Another good thing, if possible, we want to tighten our joining periods, especially for heifer mating, and cull any of those heifers that aren't pregnant, especially if you've got enough that have been born, enough that have got pregnant. Cull those ones because they're not the females we need to be moving forward in our selection process. But if that's not possible, if you need to keep those females that don't get in calf on that first or second calf, and you need to keep them in the herd because you didn't get enough females pregnant, and you need them the next year to as mating, try to avoid keeping replacement animals from those calves if they've missed that first or second mating and later on, because as it showed before, if you use a sire that was out of a cow that missed her first, didn't rebreed on that first calf, it's highly heritable, and it's likely that that bull will produce daughters that's going to do the same thing, that those daughters of that bull will not get back in calf as well. And include reproduction in the overall balanced selection in your herd. So not just selecting for growth, reproduction is a major driver, and you want to be selecting for that as well as in your herd when you're making your selection for your females moving forward. And the most improved way we can make genetic selection is improving size. A cow can only have a certain number of calves in us during a period, where the bull can have a bigger impact, because if we select those bulls, as I showed you, how heritable those traits are. If we're selecting bulls, we can make some quick gains in improving fertility within our herd. Vice versa, if we're only not making any selection pressure on those sires we're using, but we are culling the females that don't get in calf, we're really not taking our herd forward. All we're doing is taking the bottom end out of the herd, but we're not actually introducing and making better use of those females at the top end. But if we start using bulls, if that better genetic for fertility, that's when we can start to make better selection decisions and that when we are cutting out those cows at the bottom end, they are going to be the ones that are the poorer animals, rather than just those that didn't get in calf, and we're not actually making any selection on fertility with those females. If we're looking at our size, the take-home messages, we want to record scrotal size. The younger the age is a more predictive. We want to record that scrotal size, as I said, at that younger age, at 400 days. And that's a very good predictor. It's a highly good predictor of what that female fertility will be on those on his sisters as well. So, and then on his daughters. So those bulls that reach puberty earlier are going to have sisters that reach puberty earlier and daughters that reach puberty earlier as well. And make sure when you submit that when you are taking your scrotal measurements, you submit that to breed plan, and you do all the bulls, not just a subset of your bulls. If you're doing a subset, you're probably only doing your better bulls. So you're probably doing those better bulls in injustice. And that way if you do all of the bulls, you're getting a whole cross section across your herd, and you're getting more accurate EBVs. When you're early selecting your bulls, you can select on your day calving EBVs if you do have them in your breed, and you can make those selection decisions now to start driving the fertility, improving the fertility within your herd by selecting those bulls with better days to calving EBVs. Make sure when you are buying or using a bull that has an adequate scrotal size for that bull. As I said, increase semen production, increase semen or increase morphology. But in saying that, we want to make sure that we don't go for those bulls that have too big a scrotal circumference or scrotal size bulls as well, because some of those bulls can get injured because their scrotal size is just too big. And where possible, if you can, collect and use those bull soundness evaluation measurements, getting that morphology or your crush side assessment and morphology on those bulls, and make some selection decisions within your herd, selecting those bulls that have high morphologies. That is a heritable trait as well, and science or the research had showed over here in Australia that those bulls that have high morphology are going to have females that last longer in the herd as well. With that, Mario, I'll take it back and see if there's any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Fantastic. Many thanks, Paul, and most appreciated. Fertility is the #1 trait in any beef production enterprise. And I liked your presentation, and I liked the take-home messages, particularly the genetic variation that we can see. I mean, I was staggered with the 9 months variation in
puberty
bulls. Yeah, in age of puberty. I mean, that's unbelievable. That's almost a year.
Oh, that is if you're mating as a 2-year-old or to calve as a 2-year-old, those bulls on the bottom end, their daughters, they're only cycling as they're going into mating as a 3-year-old. Some of those bulls.
Yeah. I'm very happy to open it to the floor and field your questions. I don't see any questions on the chat group. Is there anybody who wants to raise any questions? I guess it was a very clear presentation. Well,
the only other one, Mario, we are running some getting started with breed plan workshops that we've been running for probably about 5 or 6 months. You can find if on the breed plan website, or also on Facebook for ABRO extension services. If anyone, they're an hour long, just an introduction into breed plan, showing you to what breed plan is and how to record traits, and also an online search as a facility as well.
Thanks, Paul. And we have seen that, and we have circulated that also on our social media posts.
Yep.
Well, there is a chat that's just popped up. What health management practices are crucial for heifers to reach puberty?
Oh. Oh, you've got to have them on a raising plan and nutrition, but you need to get your vaccinations up to date too. You don't want to be having trich or any other disease that could be spread to those bulls. So you want to be all your vaccinations up to date, and you need to have those females on a rising plan and nutrition when they're going into mating.
Yeah. Yeah. The other take-home message, Paul, and it came out very clearly in your presentation, is the impact of fertility on profit,
Yes,
and the need to make sure we've recorded that information. A, B, it's analyzed so that we can develop and implement selection indexes, and we can see real genetic progress. And I like your point there, removing the poor doers is handling the bottom end. But
it
we
is.
also select for fertility and make a change at the top end. And I think that
Exactly.
was a nice take home for me also.
Yeah, selecting your sires out of that. If you're breeding your own bull, selecting out of that top 20% of your herd. The unfortunate thing, if you do keep that cow because she didn't calve on you and you bring her in the next year, it's very likely she's going to get in calf early. She's had a year off, so she's going to have the biggest weaner. And gee, he's a good bull calf, I'll keep him. But the problem is, you're just keeping that problem going within your herd.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, wow. There's another interesting question that's popped up. Is there a specific vaccination plan that you would recommend when you are doing cattle genetics?
I probably don't have one offhand, no. Um, Certainly against any of those venereal diseases. Want to make sure they're given the best opportunities, like making sure your bulls, before you put them in the mated, are also vaccinated for anything that can be transmitted to those females that can cause to have those early fetal losses, which is going to have an effect within your herd as well.
And absolutely, Paul. And the one piece of advice I would uh, pass on is you have to contact your local veterinarian
Yes.
and have a good understanding of what the diseases are in your area and make sure you appropriately address this. And it's not only for cattle for genetics, it's for cattle for production. There's another question that's just popped up on nutrition. What nutritional strategies do you recommend to ensure heifers reach puberty on time? That's a tough one.
Well, that is a tough one. And that depends where you are. But
Yeah.
if you want to be to get the best result in your pregnancy and your heifers, you want to have those females on the best, depending where you are, on the best country you have. You don't want to be putting them up on the roughest country and expect those heifers to get pregnant. Those for that first two matings, you want to have, that's the hardest ones to get them in calf. So they should be really running on that best country you have that you're running your breeders on. That'll give them the best opportunity to get in calf and to get back in calf. After they've had that second calf, you've got a pretty good chance that they'll stay in your herd. So try and have them on that, the best country or the best quality pasture you have to get them in calf and to get them back in calf.
Yeah, Paul, I think you've handled that one well. I think the big problem we have in the subtropics is in the dry season, the protein is not sufficient and cattle lose weight.
Yeah.
And so I think the important thing is to make sure your animal is in a constant gaining weight, never losing weight.
Losing, yes.
It might stay static, but you actually, especially young animals, you want them gaining.
It is
And
because, sorry, Murray, I was
yeah,
just going to say on that slide with where I showed those 4 different years, those ones that struggled to get pregnant and as heifers had a tough time as heifers really struggled to get back in calf that second year, just because they were behind the 8 ball to start with.
yeah. So, and that's been my bugbear in the tropics is our cattle survive the winters, but we are not in survival mode. We want to be in production mode. If you want to
Yes.
be in production mode, your heifers and your cows should be maintaining, and the young animals should be gaining weight. And therefore, you need to understand your felt and you need to make sure you're giving the right supplements to your animals so that they are in a constant rising plane. Don't allow them to lose weight and then pick up weight the next season.
We
you're fooling yourself. Yes,
we
sir.
also, part of that research project, we were doing eye muscle areas on the cows 4 times during the year. So
Yeah.
intimating, outimating, prior to calving, and what was the other time? Weaning. So those, once they've used their fat reserves, they use their muscle reserves, and some of those cows, eye muscles got down to like, once they got below 30 square centimeters, they had no chance of getting pregnant. They just lost too much condition. So you've got to have those cows in a good body condition, otherwise you just got no chance of getting them back in calf as well.
Yeah, Paul, I agree with you, and I think that you touched on another important thing that I try and push is if you're going to do one measurement only in your herd, it's body condition, and you shouldn't be allowing that to decrease. Paul, we're almost on time now. One question about P12 phosphate licks contains all micronutrients. Should you still give multi-min injections? And again, I think that is a question that you really need to discuss with your veterinarian.
The other one, I don't know,
Yes.
we have a lot of, in our northern Australia, there's a lot of phosphorus deficiencies, and feeding phosphorus has a huge effect on those conception rates, with especially on those young females getting back in calf.
Yeah. No, we are also phosphate deficient, and it's been very clearly shown the benefits of feeding phosphate.
Yes.
But the question was about, should you also give multi-min injections?
Well, I mean, there has been some research showing that multi-min does make a difference, but I mean, that's up to the individual, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's to understand your grass, your felt, your soils. Talk to your veterinarian, talk to your nutritionist. If your fertility is not right up there, then there's something wrong, and you need to identify that and get on top of that. Paul, we're right on 11, and we've given some time for questions. It remains for me to thank you most sincerely for taking the time to prepare this slide, to join us once again. We're glad you're not a stranger and part of the team. We most appreciate that. And of course, thank you to everybody who's joined us for the session. We have recorded it. We will be posting it up on our YouTube channel for people to catch up and revisit and review. Paul, once again, huge thank you, and thank you to everybody else.
Thank you very much, Mario, for the opportunity. It's